Imagine this. You wake up in the pre-dawn hush, the world still drowning in shadows. Your heart pounds in your chest, even though you're surrounded by the ordinary safety of your bedroom. No one else is awake to witness the anxiety that grips you, nor can they see the quiet determination that fights to reclaim your breath. You roll out of bed, every movement an act of stealth, as though you're navigating a hostile realm. Outside, the wind howls softly against your window pane, a lonely companion to the silent battle unfolding within you. A strange paradox tugs at your mind. On the surface, your life appears calm. You have enough to eat, a roof over your head, maybe even a routine that pays the bills. Outwardly, nothing is on fire, yet inside, turmoil seethes, a conflict you've never quite managed to name. It's that sense of restlessness you feel when you lock eyes with your own reflection, uncertain of who truly looks back. It's the unspoken fear of confronting the future, knowing the greatest obstacles might not be out there in the world, but buried deep within your own psyche. This tension festers behind everyday smiles and polite small talk, behind the rituals of morning coffee and scrolling through your phone in the gloom before sunrise. What if these silent battles, those private storms of doubt, inadequacy, and restless yearning, are actually the greatest teachers you'll ever encounter? Consider the possibility that every person carries hidden scars, the remnants of midnight skirmishes no one else will ever see. Perhaps each of us is secretly dueling with regrets, insecurities, or fears of insignificance. When the world is quiet and you're left alone with your thoughts, the question echoes in your mind: is there a way to harness this silent war and let it shape you into someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate? Most people bury these internal struggles, hoping time or distraction will smother them into oblivion. They mask their private anxieties under layers of confidence or forced optimism, convinced that admitting to any frailty would be a sign of weakness. You've likely felt this pressure too, telling yourself, "I should just push through," or "I have no right to complain, others have it worse." And so the silent battle continues without acknowledgement, forging invisible chains that bind you tighter every day. Yet a part of you wonders if there's another way, an approach that doesn't deny your internal wars, but instead respects them as a crucible for personal metamorphosis. After all, history brims with examples of individuals who turned their moments of profound adversity into reservoirs of strength. You recall stories of philosophers standing stoically in the face of heartbreak, warriors who found clarity in the midst of chaos, and everyday heroes who wrestled with self-doubt until it became the bedrock of something extraordinary. Could it be that true resilience emerges only when we confront the darkness head-on? In the stillness of those pre-morning hours, as you reach for a glimmer of hope, a pressing realization dawns. These silent struggles might be the very foundation of your greatest growth. But a discomforting question arises, too. Why do we run from them? Why is modern society obsessed with flaunting confidence and positivity at all costs, denying the tumult beneath the surface? If silent battles truly shape the strongest souls, then what keeps us so unwilling to acknowledge them? You might even ask yourself whether you've bought into a collective illusion that as long as we keep ourselves entertained, keep scrolling through social feeds, keep chasing validation from strangers, we can ignore the constant hum of unresolved tension in our minds. Are we afraid that by exploring these inner conflicts, we'll unravel too much, learn too much, or discover some fundamental truth that dismantles our carefully curated self-image? Even as these doubts rise up, a strange surge of curiosity and courage flickers within. Is it possible, you wonder, to embrace these silent battles as guides rather than enemies? To let each pang of discomfort reveal a facet of your strength rather than serve as a reminder of your flaws? The greatest question stands before you in stark relief. What if the path to true resilience and genuine self-discovery requires you to lean into the very shadows you've tried so hard to outrun? What if your silent battles, those restless nights, those gnawing anxieties, are the guardians of a deeper wisdom that no external achievement or validation could ever grant? This is the threshold you now approach. Beyond it lies an unsettling yet profoundly liberating exploration. Acknowledging the hidden weights that pull you down and understanding the roots of these daily skirmishes with your own mind. Take a step further, and you may find that what we call struggle is merely the raw material for transformation. The next step will bring clarity to why these conflicts exist in the first place and how they burrow so deeply into our identities. To understand that fully, you must dare to venture into the underbelly of this silent war, into the hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. Beneath that silent conflict lies an invisible architecture, an unspoken system of beliefs and pressures that give shape to your innermost struggles. You've already felt its weight in those moments of quiet desperation, yet society has trained you to hide it behind a polished exterior. Perhaps you were taught never to let your guard down, never to speak openly of your fears, and certainly never to let the world see the cracks forming in your resolve. But these cracks are where the light of truth seeps in, where your most authentic self tries to emerge. Why is it so difficult to embrace the reality of these private battles? One reason can be traced back to a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be strong. People often equate strength with an absence of fear or doubt, as though a truly resilient person never falters under the weight of life. This notion has a long cultural history. Myths and legends frequently portray heroes as nearly invincible figures, while modern media bombards us with images of airbrushed perfection, ridiculing vulnerability as weakness. Subtly, you learn to measure your worth by how well you appear to keep it all together, regardless of what's happening beneath the surface. Yet Stoic philosophy, especially as taught by thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and Musonius Rufus, challenges this simplistic view. True strength, they argue, resides not in the absence of struggle, but in the way you respond to it. Epictetus famously proposed that while you cannot control external events, you can control your mindset and reactions. Hidden within this teaching is a radical idea. The silent battles waged within you are not signs of your inadequacy. They are indicators that you have the capacity for reflection, for questioning the status quo, for forging a resilient inner core. If only you could peel back the layers of social conditioning that urge you to keep a brave face no matter what. That conditioning runs deeper than mere social norms. It's embedded in the way most modern societies approach education, workplace culture, and even personal relationships. From a young age, you're taught to compete for recognition, good grades, shiny trophies, social media accolades. Struggles are treated like stains you should scrub away before anyone notices. The entire structure nudges you to believe that if you admit to fear or uncertainty, you jeopardize your success and undermine your future. Over time, this conditioning morphs into a self-fulfilling prophecy. You fear being vulnerable. Thus, you avoid exploring the deeper currents of your psyche. In turn, unexamined fears intensify and become more formidable, breeding further discomfort. One psychological factor fueling this loop is cognitive dissonance, the tension arising from holding two conflicting beliefs at once. On one hand, you sense that grappling with personal doubts is part of being human. It's inescapable and even necessary for growth. On the other, you carry the inherited conviction that showing any sign of internal conflict is a form of failure. Trying to reconcile these opposing ideas generates inner friction, a silent friction you might try to escape through various forms of distraction, entertainment, substance use, obsessive productivity, or a never-ending quest for external validation. Stoic teachings emphasize that genuine freedom begins in the mind. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his Meditations, highlighted how the mind can remain unconquered even when the body or external circumstances seem dire. What does this mean for you, caught in the midst of personal turmoil you scarcely dare to name? It suggests that your silent battle might actually be the training ground for mental clarity. Each doubt, each fear, each sense of inadequacy is an opportunity to practice the art of distinguishing between what you can and cannot control. In other words, you learn to transform adversity into fuel for inner growth. But let's step deeper into the philosophical roots. Consider that part of your struggle is born from a fundamental existential concern, the awareness of your own mortality and the inherent uncertainty of life. Seneca reminds you that time, above all else, is a limited resource. Fearing your silent battles might sometimes stem from a deeper fear that you're wasting your life or missing out on your true potential. There's a psychological interplay here. You worry that if you devote too much energy to acknowledging your anxieties, you'll lose precious time that could be spent striving toward your goals. Yet by refusing to face those anxieties, you often end up stuck in a cycle that consumes even more mental space, leaving you feeling drained and even further from the clarity you seek. Here is where modern interpreters of Stoicism, like certain psychologists and self-improvement thinkers, have fused ancient wisdom with contemporary insights. They point out that denying your inner conflicts can lead to what therapists call internalized shame. This shame grows when you believe you should be coping flawlessly, and it erodes your sense of self-worth when you inevitably discover that you can't. It's a misalignment between your internal reality and the external persona you present. That gap, that dissonance, is precisely where the real battle rages, weaving in social factors. Notice how online platforms and popular culture magnify these pressures. Everywhere you look, there's someone promoting a life of constant productivity, unstoppable motivation, or effortless success. It's easy to suspect that you're the only one who feels a knot of dread in the pit of your stomach at 3 in the morning. This collective illusion, everyone else is thriving, so why aren't you, pushes you to bury your battles even further. The irony is that everyone else is often wrestling with the same illusions, perpetuating a cycle in which silent struggles are deemed too shameful to acknowledge. Musonius Rufus, lesser known but just as profound, lectured that true self-improvement stems from living in accordance with nature and reason, not from chasing worldly esteem. Applied to your situation, it means you benefit from accepting that internal conflict is woven into the human condition. Learning to navigate it with honesty, reflection, and resilience is more valuable than any facade of unbreakable composure. The hidden problem is not that you have these struggles, it's that you've been conditioned to mislabel them as faults or imperfections rather than raw catalysts for growth. So, what does this conditioning look like on a daily basis? It might manifest as a relentless need to fix yourself whenever you feel distressed, as though discomfort is a malfunction rather than a sign that something deeper requires your attention. You experience fear, and immediately you assume something is wrong with you, rather interpreting that fear as a messenger, beckoning you toward introspection. You sense exhaustion and blame your lack of discipline, while ignoring the possibility that you're pushing yourself in the wrong direction or at an unsustainable pace. All these tendencies merge into a silent architecture of shame and denial, overshadowing the transformative potential of your internal battles. But the Stoics remind us that these conflicts are neither random nor purposeless. They arise because you're an intelligent being capable of imagining a better reality, capable of grappling with abstract ideas like virtue, purpose, and mortality. That very capacity ensures you're destined to wrestle with existential questions, questions that modern life, in its frenzy, tries to dull or deflect. You've now seen a glimpse of the hidden problem, the conflict between your innate capacity for reflection and the societal pressure to appear perpetually confident, infallible, and unshakably content. The friction emerges from ancient needs meeting modern illusions, from philosophical truths colliding with superficial norms. Understanding these roots opens the door to a deeper awareness of how and why you struggle as you do. More importantly, it hints at the fact that these silent battles might be necessary stepping stones on your path to genuine self-mastery. And yet, you may still be wondering, what is the real cost of ignoring them, of continuing to wear the mask and pretend your internal war doesn't exist? The repercussions extend far beyond your individual sense of well-being. Like an unseen ripple, your hidden struggles can shape not only your own destiny, but also the communal ethos around you. Before you can move forward to the rebellion, before you can break free, you need to glimpse the far-reaching consequences of staying stuck in the shadows. Only then will the true urgency of this awakening become undeniable. That's where we turn our gaze next, to the subtle but devastating impact these silent battles have on both you and the world around you. Consider for a moment the subtle way these silent battles weave through the fabric of your life. You may not openly talk about them or even fully acknowledge them, but they're never truly absent. They're there in your hesitation to voice your opinions during a meeting, in the flash of envy when someone else's success reminds you of your own perceived shortcomings, and in that gnawing urge to scroll endlessly through social feeds instead of reflecting on your inner state. Taken individually, these might seem like trivial inconveniences or harmless quirks, but in aggregate, they exert a gravitational pull that can reshape the trajectory of your life. This is the truly insidious nature of silent battles. They operate without public recognition, often without our full awareness. As a result, they're free to take root in the psyche, altering our perceptions and reactions. Picture yourself in a crowded room, whether it's a social gathering or a professional event. You might wear a confident smile, exchange pleasantries, and do your best to blend in. Yet beneath the surface, you're second-guessing every sentence you speak, every gesture you make, worried that someone will see through your facade. This quiet tension can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, leading you to overcompensate or withdraw. Over time, you adopt coping strategies that revolve around avoidance, thus reinforcing the sense that your insecurities must remain hidden at all costs. But how does this dynamic ripple out beyond your personal experience? One manifestation is cultural stagnation. When individuals collectively silence their private struggles, it diminishes genuine human connection. Everyone feels compelled to maintain a veneer of composure. Vulnerability, once recognized as an avenue for building trust and mutual understanding, becomes stigmatized. Groups and communities lose the creative spark that arises from confronting adversity together. In the workplace, for example, employees might fear voicing challenges or mental health concerns, leading to burnout or resentment. Meanwhile, organizations miss out on the benefits of open dialogue and authentic problem solving. This cycle robs not just one person, but entire collectives of empathy, collaboration, and growth. From a Stoic perspective, you might recall Marcus Aurelius' observations that humans are meant to work in harmony, like limbs of a single body. Yet the unspoken burdens each person carries can create invisible barriers. When your silent battles remain unaddressed, you unconsciously project them onto others, perhaps lashing out in small, unexpected ways, or withholding warmth and kindness because you're too preoccupied guarding your own wounded pride. Seneca, in his letters, often highlighted how fear and insecurity corrode relationships. When you cannot face your private turmoil, you tend to erect walls that keep you stuck in isolation. The tragedy is that these walls separate not only you from others, but you from your own potential. On a more personal level, the consequences manifest as stunted emotional resilience. Imagine living in a constant state of low-level anxiety, the source of which you never fully confront. Each day, you add another layer of complexity to your elaborate strategies of avoidance. The emotional energy spent on hiding your battles drains your capacity for genuine joy or spontaneity. Over time, you develop a sort of learned helplessness, an ingrained belief that your insecurities and fears are insurmountable, so the best you can do is keep them neatly tucked away. Yet the Stoics teach that adversity, properly examined, acts as a chisel that carves out our best selves. By refusing to face adversity, you lose out on the refining fire of hardship, denying yourself the opportunity for profound transformation. This avoidance can also distort your identity. Humans have an amazing ability to adapt, which is generally a strength, but adaptation can become maladaptive if it means resigning yourself to a diminished existence. If you chronically suppress your inner conflicts, you risk internalizing a message of unworthiness. I can't handle my own darkness. This message seeps to the core of who you believe yourself to be. While on the outside you may function reasonably well, meeting deadlines, paying bills, keeping social appointments, inside you remain trapped in a loop of silent self-sabotage. Epictetus insisted that each person is responsible for their own judgments, their own mental conditioning. If you judge your silent battles as shameful, you inevitably judge yourself as flawed for experiencing them at all. Moreover, these unseen consequences can crystallize into self-fulfilling prophecies about your abilities and destiny. Let's say you have a persistent fear of failure. Rather than acknowledging it as a normal human concern and working through it, you bury it under layers of nonchalance and distraction. That fear doesn't go away. It continues to guide your decisions. You may never attempt the big project or life change that secretly calls to you, telling yourself, it's not the right time, or I'm not interested. But in truth, the silent battle is winning, because you'd rather stay safe in inaction than risk exposing your vulnerability. Years down the line, this unpursued dream becomes a source of regret, further reinforcing the belief that you're not capable of more. On a societal scale, these individual regrets accumulate into collective inertia. Large portions of the population stick to safe, familiar routines, rarely venturing into uncharted territory, spiritually, intellectually, or creatively. Culture becomes less dynamic, more prone to superficial distractions that stave off introspection. As technology advances, it offers ever more sophisticated ways to escape from any self-reflection, intensifying the cycle. The more you hide from the storm inside, the more your outer life becomes a carefully curated facade devoid of real depth or risk-taking. Finally, consider the effect on personal morality and virtue. Stoicism reminds us that virtue arises from honest self-examination, from the willingness to face your limitations and choose ethical actions aligned with reason. When you're engaged in an unacknowledged inner war, you may find yourself morally compromised in subtle ways, telling white lies to justify your behavior, blaming others for your emotional reactions, or manipulating situations to preserve your fragile sense of control. Over time, these small moral compromises can accumulate, dulling your conscience. The silent battles thus shape your soul in darker ways, as you slide gradually into moral gray zones you once might have condemned. If you were to step outside yourself and observe from a bird's-eye view, you might witness this long chain of consequences unraveling across your personal history. Every time you back down from acknowledging your own conflict, the reverberations extended further, affecting your relationships, shaping your goals, even altering your moral compass. The tragedy lies in how quietly it all happens. There's no sudden cataclysm, no dramatic fall from grace. Instead, it's a slow fade, an invisible dulling of life's vibrancy. all because you never turned to face the silent storm roaring inside. Yet awareness of these consequences can also be a catalyst for change. Once you see how pervasive the problem is, how it compromises your sense of self, your capacity for connection, and your contribution to the world, you gain a compelling reason to rebel against it. You begin to realize that acknowledging your fears and insecurities might be the most self-preserving act you could undertake, not a humiliating admission of weakness. Breaking the silence isn't just about personal liberation. It's a stand against a culture that encourages you to bury your struggles as if they were shameful secrets. So, if these unseen consequences are so dire, if they poison both your private and public life, the next question becomes, how can you overturn this silent tyranny? The time has come for a more radical exploration, for a rebellion that casts aside the illusions of strength as the absence of struggle. Only when you decide to break this cycle can you tap into the deeper reserves of resilience, purpose, and moral clarity that Stoic philosophy promises. This is where we move from knowledge of the problem to actively challenging it and charting a path toward genuine freedom. Prepare yourself for a bold leap of faith as we turn next to the rebellion, how to break free. Imagine the moment you decide to stand up against everything you once thought unassailable, not in some dramatic roar of defiance, but in a quiet, focused act of clarity. The instant you tell yourself, no more hiding. Up to now, your silent battles have lived in the shadows, shaping your decisions behind the scenes. You've recognized their origins, their devastating ripple effects, and the way they're reinforced by cultural norms that prize external composure over inner truth. Now comes the turning point. You must rebel, not necessarily against society or external constraints, but against the powerful urge within you to keep denying your inner conflict. This rebellion begins with the stark admission that your silent battles don't define you, they reveal you. It's an audacious act to open the cage door and let your doubts and fears step into the light. Yet it's precisely in this unguarded act that you plant the seeds of your liberation. By naming what you fear, you deprive it of its power to operate invisibly. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." When you confess your silent skirmishes to yourself or to a trusted confidant, you transform nebulous anxiety into a tangible reality you can address. A radical departure from the norm, this rebellion demands you dismantle the very idea that feeling insecure or uncertain is a personal failing. Think of the centuries of Stoic wisdom that champion the concept of acknowledging hardship as an integral part of life. Marcus Aurelius reflected on how adversity merely reveals what we're made of and teaches us our true capacity. If you adopt that mindset, your rebellious stance no longer feels like a shameful admission, but rather a courageous unveiling of your authentic self. Consider practical ways to seize this new paradigm. One tactic is to create a deliberate forum for your own internal battles. Some people do it through journaling, others through deep conversation, and still others through structured reflection akin to Marcus Aurelius's meditations. By carving out a space in your daily routine to confront your struggles head-on, you become the observer of your thoughts rather than their captive. Epictetus often reminded his followers that it is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them. In a private journal or reflective practice, you can examine these judgments before they gain destructive momentum. You become an active participant in your mental processes, identifying recurring patterns and false narratives that keep you shackled. But rebellion doesn't end with private introspection. The next bold step is selective vulnerability. This doesn't mean broadcasting every insecurity to everyone you meet. That would be neither wise nor stoic. Instead, it involves choosing trusted individuals or communities where you can share pieces of your inner conflict without fear of derision. Think of it as forging alliances in your rebellion. Humans are inherently social. The ancient Stoics acknowledged we are rational, communal creatures. When you open up to a confidant, perhaps a close friend, a mentor, a support group, you tap into the power of collective resilience. Suddenly, the illusions that you are the only one who feels this way crumble. You see that others, too, wage their own silent wars, each with its distinct shape and intensity. And in that mutual recognition lies a profound source of strength. Now, consider a deeper shift: your outlook on failure. Historically, you might have avoided any endeavor that risked exposing your limitations. True Stoic rebellion means embracing the possibility of failure as an essential element of growth. Seneca wrote extensively about how fortune tests the strong. By daring to fail, you are essentially proclaiming that your worth is not measured by outcome alone, but by your willingness to engage with life wholeheartedly. This willingness to face failure also undercuts perfectionism, another silent tyrant that thrives on your fear of judgment. Paradoxically, allowing yourself to fail can unlock the very excellence you once tried so hard to protect. You may wonder if this rebellion will sow chaos in your life. In a way, it will. Expect to feel the friction of rewiring old patterns and challenging deep-seated assumptions. Yet there's a crucial distinction between destructive chaos and creative chaos. The rebellious energy we're talking about is one of transformation. It breaks down stagnation and compels you to remake yourself on sturdier foundations. The old illusions that define strength as unshakable composure must give way to a new truth. Real strength grows only when it's tested and sharpened against adversity. That leads to another critical element: forging an internal why. If you are to sustain this rebellion, it has to be fueled by something deeper than momentary impulse. Ask yourself, why do I want to break free from silence? Is it so you can live more honestly, forge deeper relationships, or simply find peace in being who you truly are? The Roman Stoics believed in aligning daily actions with a higher sense of purpose, whether that purpose was virtue, duty, or service to humanity. When your rebellion is anchored in a meaningful cause, be it personal authenticity or the well-being of those you care about, you'll find it far easier to withstand the initial discomfort. Once you uncover your why, harness a Stoic principle known as premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Instead of avoiding thoughts of your struggles, actively imagine the worst-case scenarios that your inner battles might provoke. This might sound counterintuitive, but the effect can be liberating. By rehearsing potential setbacks and emotional storms in your mind, you desensitize yourself to their shock value. You also equip yourself with strategies to handle them. Like a warrior preparing for conflict, you sharpen your mental armaments well before the battle intensifies. Thus, when adversity inevitably appears, you greet it not with denial, but with a calm, practiced readiness. Equally important is reevaluating your relationship with external validation. Recall how modern culture tends to reward polished personas and punishes visible vulnerability. Your rebellion will flourish only when you become less dependent on external applause and more attuned to your inner compass. As Musonius Rufus taught, what matters is not how the crowd perceives you, but whether you remain aligned with reason and virtue. In practical terms, this might involve a digital detox, limiting your exposure to social media, or conscientiously reflecting on why you seek certain forms of recognition. Gradually, you discover that the only validation that truly matters comes from living in accordance with your principles. Ultimately, the hallmark of this rebellion is action. Reflection and vulnerability are powerful, but unless they galvanize change in your habits, relationships, and mindset, you risk circling back to old patterns. Identify a single step that challenges your silence. Maybe it's admitting a fear you've hidden for years, or taking on a project that intimidates you. The specifics don't matter as much as the symbolic value of saying, yes, I acknowledge the battle, and I choose to engage with it. Each such act becomes a building block in the new edifice of your life. A life defined not by denial, but by the steady confidence that you can and will meet adversity head on. As you embark on this rebellion, you stand at the threshold of a new frontier. No longer do you view your silent battles as shameful secrets. Instead, you see them as raw material for forging character. Marcus Aurelius encouraged us to transform obstacles into fuel, turning every stumbling block into an opportunity to practice virtue. In that spirit, your inner conflicts become points of ignition, sparks that illuminate your path to genuine strength and unshakable resolve. And yet, there is a final revelation waiting, a deeper truth that transcends even the act of rebelling. In the end, you may discover that freedom lies not just in facing your silent battles, but in understanding the profound purpose behind them, a purpose that upends old fears and animates you with renewed passion for life. That ultimate truth stands on the horizon, beckoning you onward. Picture the aftermath of your rebellion. You've confronted your silent battles, unmasked them, and even welcomed them as unexpected allies in your quest for self-knowledge. You've learned to stand amidst your fears, heartbreaks, and uncertainties without letting them define or diminish you. And now you sense something stirring in the quiet spaces of your mind, an awareness that transcends mere coping or resilience. A truth that feels like it's always been there, yet only now do you finally see it clearly. Your silent battles are not obstacles to be vanquished, but mirrors reflecting your deepest calling. Look back on each moment you've wrestled with doubt or pain. Perhaps it was an instance of heartbreak that made you question your worth, or a seemingly endless night when your mind refused to let you rest. Remember how each conflict left an imprint, not just of struggle, but of revelation. In the heat of battle, you glimpsed your core values, the impulses that guide you toward compassion, integrity, courage, or wisdom. Every time adversity threatened to silence you, some spark inside refused to be extinguished. You realize now that the spark is you, your most authentic self, shining through every fracture. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." That fountain of good is your capacity to transform anguish into insight, fear into purpose, and isolation into empathy. In earlier stages, you perceived your silent battles as dreadful signs of inadequacy. But after rebelling against the myth that vulnerability equals weakness, you've discovered an essential truth. The deeper the wound, the more room for compassion and growth to take root. This is not a romanticized notion of pain, but a pragmatic understanding, consistent with Stoic ideals, that the trials of life refine you like fire tempers steel. This ultimate truth unveils itself fully when you ask, what if my greatest triumphs are born from what I've deemed my greatest defeats? By inverting your perspective, you see that each fear or insecurity has served as a crucible, forging qualities you might never have developed in a life free from hardship. Perhaps your compassion for others springs from having known loneliness. Your drive to seek truth might arise from once living in denial. Your empathy for those who struggle might trace back to the nights you spent wrestling with your own mind. The strength of your soul is inseparable from the very battles you once sought to hide. As this realization settles in, a second, more astonishing insight emerges. These silent battles are not exclusively yours. They form a universal thread linking you to every human being who's ever walked the earth. From the ancient Stoics to your closest friends, everyone grapples with some internal war. This shared hardship is the basis of genuine human connection. It transcends superficial differences and breaks down the walls that isolation once built. Indeed, Epictetus asserted that we are all citizens of one great city, participants in a vast commonwealth of reason and empathy. Recognizing the universality of struggle dissolves your sense of alienation, replacing it with a quiet, profound solidarity. In that moment, you see how illusions of separateness, of thinking your difficulties make you flawed or alone were always the biggest lie. The capacity for love, empathy, and authentic relationship blossoms the instant you accept that vulnerability is what binds humans together. It's the secret handshake of the soul, quietly acknowledging, I too have felt the weight of unseen burdens. No grand gesture needed, no dramatic confession, just a subtle yet radical shift in perception in which every wounded place within you becomes a bridge rather than a barrier. Now look outward at the world that once seemed hostile or indifferent to your pain. You may recognize new opportunities to serve, to lead, or to listen. Because if silent battles shape the strongest souls, then those same souls have a responsibility to themselves and to others to kindle hope where it's grown dim. Strength, once misinterpreted as stoic detachment, reveals itself instead as active compassion, the willingness to stand beside someone in their storm without recoiling. This willingness is perhaps the truest measure of your inner fortitude, one that outlasts any trophy or fleeting applause. The final piece of this most powerful realization is a paradox that Seneca would likely appreciate. The moment you embrace your hidden struggles, you stop being ruled by them. It's as though by stepping into the storm's eye, you discover a serene vantage point. No, your problems don't magically vanish. Nor does life promise an end to new hardships, but your relationship to struggle transforms. You're no longer the hunted, frantically dodging each wave of anxiety or fear. You become the observer, the navigator, someone who accepts the storm and sails on, confident in the unsinkable vessel of your spirit. This shift changes everything. Goals you once pursued out of insecurity, fame, wealth, status, lose their luster. In their place arises a longing for more meaningful aims, cultivating virtue, deepening relationships, contributing to something greater than yourself. Even if you continue your external pursuits, your motivation is purified by the clarity that real fulfillment comes from honoring your inner integrity, not from proving your worth to a fickle audience. In time, you may discover that even your notion of enemy transforms. Previously, you might have labeled certain people or circumstances as adversaries, believing they triggered your silent battles. Yet you now see those triggers as catalysts. The adversity they introduced forced you to look inward, to recognize the dormant power you carried all along. In the grand tapestry of your life, these enemies were teachers, sometimes harsh, sometimes unrelenting, but instrumental in revealing the depth of your own resolve. This final realization, the ultimate truth, returns you to the very origin of your silent battles. They were always guides, not shackles. In a culture that urges you to brand every discomfort as a defect, you revolt by saying, "This discomfort is my teacher." And thus, your greatest burdens become your allies, forging a personal narrative of resilience that no external force can undermine. The once daunting nights of self-doubt become chapters of victory, each testifying to your capacity for transformation. Now, as you step into the next day, the silent battles still arise, but they no longer diminish you. They beckon you to refine your sense of purpose, to love more fully, to reach out more bravely. And that, finally, is the essence of Stoic wisdom. You realize that your power doesn't lie in controlling the storm. It lies in choosing who you become in its wake. Every fleeting moment of pain, every flash of anger, every pang of self-doubt, they all converge to shape your soul into something both unbreakable and profoundly compassionate. This is the final truth. In the acceptance of your silent battles, you uncover the invincible core of your humanity. Carry this realization gently but firmly, like a guiding torch in a darkened corridor. Let it illuminate your path, and perhaps the paths of those around you. The journey ahead will still have its dangers, but armed with this revelation, you stride forward as one who has awakened to the deeper meaning of every internal conflict. Yours is now the strength of a soul tempered by adversity, capable of transforming every silent war into a symphony of growth, wisdom, and boundless human connection.